My name is Eric, and I've never been one to believe in fairy tales, especially not the kind where a man marries a woman with a teenage daughter and everything just falls into place. But when I met Diane, I wanted to believe it could happen. She had a quiet strength to her, the kind of woman who could hold her ground without raising her voice. She'd been through her share of storms, raising her daughter Maya mostly on her own after her ex bailed when Maya was 6. When Diane and I started dating, Maya was 15, cold, defensive, and angry at the world. I took it in stride, thinking I could slowly earn her trust. That maybe, in time, she'd see me not as some intruder, but as someone who genuinely wanted to be a part of their world. I was wrong, but I didn't know that yet. From the beginning, Maya didn't hide how she felt about me. I'd walk into a room and she'd leave. I'd ask her how school was, and she'd roll her eyes and slam the fridge shut. At dinners, she'd talk over me or pretend I wasn't there. Diane tried to smooth things over. She just needs time, she'd say, touching my arm with that gentle reassurance of hers. And I believed her, at least in the beginning. I told myself that teenagers were tough, that maybe Maya was just acting out because she didn't know how to handle change. But the more time passed, the harder it became to ignore the edge in Maya's tone, the way she looked at me like I was dirt under her shoe. I wanted to be patient, but patience starts to wear thin when you're constantly being disrespected under your own roof. I remember one night vividly. It was just after New Year's, and Diane had fallen asleep early. I was in the kitchen doing dishes when Maya stormed in, slamming the pantry door hard enough to rattle the shelves. I asked if she was okay, and without turning around, she muttered, "Why do you even care? You're not my ing dad." I froze. The words didn't hurt me because they were true. They hurt because of the venom behind them. I dried my hands and calmly told her that I wasn't trying to be her father, just a decent man who cared about her mother. She scoffed, then turned and looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're a joke. You're just a loser trying to play house." I wish I could say I kept my cool, but something in me snapped. It wasn't just the words. It was the years of biting my tongue, of trying to earn a place in a family that never really wanted me. I told her, firmly but without yelling, that I was done walking on eggshells. I told her that if she couldn't live under our roof with basic respect, she needed to leave. Diane and I had discussed boundaries before, but we never imagined we'd have to enforce them like this. Maya looked at me with this wild disbelief, as if she'd never expected someone to call her bluff. "You can't kick me out. Mom won't let you." Her voice trembled, not with fear, but fury. I didn't respond. I just walked upstairs and told Diane what had happened. Diane sat up in bed, stunned. I could see the war in her eyes, caught between love for her daughter and the realization that something had to change. We stayed up all night talking, going over every option. Maya was 18 now, legally an adult, but still her baby in so many ways. I didn't want to push Diane into anything, but I also couldn't let our home turn into a battlefield. The next morning, Diane told Maya she had 2 weeks to find somewhere else to go. Maya didn't scream or cry. She just smiled, a cold, almost smug smile, and said, "You'll regret this." Then she packed a duffel bag and walked out before the 2 weeks were even up. For a moment, I thought that would be the end of it. Maybe she'd go stay with her father or crash with a friend and eventually cool down. Maybe, just maybe, we could finally find some peace. But the silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was eerie. Diane barely spoke for days. She kept staring at her phone, hoping for a message, a call, anything. I tried to comfort her, but I knew she blamed herself. Knew a part of her wondered if we'd made the right call. I didn't say it then, but I was proud of her. Setting that boundary had taken more courage than most people realized. And even if Maya couldn't see it yet, we had done what we needed to do. Then the messages started coming. At first, they were just to me. Anonymous numbers. "You think you're safe?" one read. Another, "Don't sleep too easy." I knew it was Maya. No one else had a reason to say something like that. I didn't tell Diane right away. She was already struggling, and I didn't want to add to her pain. I figured it was just a phase, a way for Maya to lash out and try to scare me. But then one of the messages mentioned Diane by name. "She's not safe either," it read. That's when everything shifted. It was no longer about me and Maya. It was about protecting the woman I loved. I didn't want to believe it at first. I told myself it was just teenage rage, maybe a bad joke taken too far. But deep down, I knew better. There was something cold and deliberate about the way those messages were written. No emojis, no slang, just blunt, chilling threats typed out like statements of fact. Don't sleep too easy. She's not safe either. The words played in my head like an old song stuck on repeat. I stopped deleting the messages and started saving them. Something told me this wasn't going to blow over like a typical family argument. For about a week, I kept the messages to myself. Diane was already carrying so much guilt, and I didn't want to pile on more. But the longer I waited, the worse I felt. I found myself double-checking the locks at night, walking past the front windows slower than usual, peeking through the blinds just to make sure nothing seemed out of place. Every car that slowed near our house made my heart skip. Every knock on the door made my stomach tighten. One night, I woke up at 3 a.m. because I thought I heard someone whispering outside. There was no one there, just wind brushing past the trees, but it felt like something was shifting. It was the sixth message that finally broke me. It came in just after dinner on a quiet Tuesday. Diane and I had been sitting on the couch watching one of those true crime shows she loves. The irony, looking back, is bitter. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I picked it up without thinking. The message said, "What's it like sleeping next to someone who's already marked?" I froze. My chest tightened in an instant. I read it again, hoping I'd misunderstood. I hadn't. I looked over at Diane, who was laughing softly at the show, completely unaware of what had just landed in my lap. I couldn't keep it from her anymore. "Diane," I said, and the tone of my voice must have alarmed her because she muted the TV immediately. I handed her the phone and watched as her expression changed. First confusion, then realization, then that unmistakable flicker of fear. She read through the string of messages I'd saved, one after the other, in silence. When she looked up at me, her eyes were glassy. "You think it's Maya?" she whispered, though I could tell she already knew the answer. "I do," I said, "but I need more than just a hunch." We sat in silence for a long time. Neither of us said it out loud, but the feeling in the room was heavy. Something had shifted. We weren't dealing with a rebellious daughter anymore. We were dealing with something else entirely. Something darker. The next morning, I called the police. I didn't want to escalate things like that. No stepfather wants to be the one who gets law enforcement involved with his own family. But this wasn't a spat over curfew or bad grades. This was a direct threat. And if Maya was willing to say something like that about her own mother, I had no idea what else she might be capable of. The officer who came to our house, Detective Reeves, was calm, methodical, and surprisingly empathetic. I showed him the messages, explained the background, and gave him Maya's full name and the last known address Diane had for her. He didn't promise anything, but he didn't dismiss us either. "You did the right thing," he said before he left. "We'll take it from here." That night, Diane cried. Not loud sobs, but the quiet, exhausted kind of tears that only come when a mother feels like she's failed. "I never thought it would come to this," she said, curled up on the edge of our bed, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. "She used to be such a sweet kid. You remember that picture on the fridge? The one where she's holding that stuffed giraffe? She carried that thing everywhere." I didn't say much. There wasn't anything I could say that would soften what we were going through. All I could do was sit beside her and hold her hand while our world continued to unravel. 2 days later, Detective Reeves called. He'd traced the number the messages came from. It was registered to a burner phone, prepaid and untraceable beyond the point of sale. But the real breakthrough came when they pulled footage from a security camera near a pawn shop downtown. The footage showed Maya walking into the shop with 2 men, faces partially obscured by hoodies. She looked different, harder, colder. She wasn't the sulking teenager who used to slam doors in our hallway. She was standing there, laughing with 2 grown men like she didn't have a care in the world. The timestamp on the footage? Just a few hours after one of the most threatening messages had been sent. The police decided to keep a low profile while they gathered more evidence. They suspected that the men with Maya might be gang-affiliated. Apparently, one of them had a record, armed robbery, assault, even some ties to home invasions. That's when the real fear set in. This wasn't just about emotional outbursts anymore. Maya had crossed over into something criminal, and we were right in the center of it. Diane didn't sleep for days. She started jumping at small noises, ice dropping in the freezer, the creak of floorboards at night. We bought a new security system, installed cameras on the front and back of the house, even changed our locks. It felt like we were preparing for a war we didn't understand. And still, part of me hoped, prayed, that this was all just a scare tactic. That maybe Maya had gotten in too deep with the wrong people and didn't know how to back out. But the next message killed that hope. It came late at night. A video file, no text. I opened it with shaking hands. The clip showed a blurry shot of our house, our actual house, from across the street. The footage was grainy, clearly taken from a phone, but there was no mistaking the angle or the details. Our porch light, the flower pots, Diane's car in the driveway. A man's voice whispered from behind the camera, "Tick-tock." That was it. Just 2 words, barely audible. But I felt them in my bones. That was when I realized this wasn't about punishment anymore. It wasn't about Maya being angry at me for throwing her out. It wasn't even about her mother. This had become something else entirely. Something that could burn everything down if we didn't act fast. After watching that video, I didn't sleep at all. I laid in bed next to Diane, staring at the ceiling with my heart pounding like a drum inside my chest. Every creak in the house made my body twitch. I kept imagining someone outside, waiting. I knew it was irrational. Our doors were locked, cameras were up, and the alarm was armed. But logic doesn't mean a damn thing when fear takes hold. That video changed everything. It confirmed Maya wasn't just venting. She was watching us, planning something. And I wasn't about to sit back and let her burn our life to the ground. The next morning, I drove straight to the police station with the video still saved on my phone. I didn't wait for an appointment or call ahead. I marched right up to the front desk and demanded to speak to Detective Reeves. When he finally came out to meet me, I could tell immediately that something had shifted on his end too. He wasn't casual anymore. His eyes were serious, jaw clenched like he already knew what I was about to show him. I handed over my phone and watched his expression as the video played. He didn't flinch, didn't ask questions. He just nodded slowly and said, "We've been following something. I think we need to talk." We sat down in a small, windowless room in the back of the station. He pulled out a thin folder and laid it on the table between us. "Eric," he said, "what I'm about to show you is part of an ongoing investigation. You and your wife are not under suspicion, but I need your full cooperation moving forward." I nodded, bracing myself. He opened the folder and slid a few printed photos across the table. One of them was a grainy screenshot of the same video I'd just shown him. Another showed Maya and the 2 men from the pawn shop again, this time entering what looked like a rundown apartment complex. "This guy," he said, pointing to one of the men, "is Anthony Lewis. Street name Tone. 2-time felon. Known associate of a local crew involved in burglaries and intimidation gigs. The guy with him, Carlos Meza, was arrested last year for aggravated assault, got out on a technicality." I leaned in, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Why is Maya with them?" I asked. Reeves sighed. "That's what we've been trying to figure out. But based on what we found in their apartment yesterday, it's worse than we thought." He flipped to another photo, this time a wall covered in printouts and handwritten notes. My house was circled in red on a satellite map. There were photos, some printed from street cameras, others clearly taken by hand, of Diane and me going about our day. One of them showed Diane getting into her car in a grocery store parking lot. Another showed me taking out the trash in my bathrobe. "We found this taped inside a closet at the apartment," Reeves explained. "It's part of a hit list. You're target number 2. There's a contractor listed for each job." I stared at the photos, barely breathing. It didn't feel real. I wasn't someone who belonged in a crime investigation folder. I was a middle-aged man with a mortgage, a lawn I hated mowing, and a wife I adored. How the hell did we end up as targets? Reeves continued. "Based on the notes and phone logs, we believe Maya contracted these men to break into your home. They weren't just going to steal. They were going to destroy. Set fire to personal property. There's a note that says, 'Make him pay, make her cry.' That's from Maya. It's in her handwriting. Your wife confirmed it." I sat back, stunned. I didn't know what to say. This wasn't just impulsive teenage vengeance. This was hatred with intent, and it was directed at us with surgical precision. Why? I asked, more to myself than to him. Reeves closed the folder and looked me straight in the eye. You threw her out. That's what triggered it. But I think she was already slipping before that. She found people who validated her rage, gave her a place to pour it, and they used her, plain and simple. The police put us on a protective watch. Unmarked cars started circling the neighborhood during the day and parking nearby at night. Diane and I were briefed on emergency procedures. What to do if someone tried to force their way in, how to trigger the silent alarm, which officer to contact directly. It all felt surreal. Our home became a fortress, and still, the fear seeped in through the cracks. Diane couldn't stop pacing. She barely ate. At night, she'd lie in bed and whisper, "How did it come to this?" over and over like a prayer gone unanswered. Then came the arrest. Maya was taken into custody at 2:37 a.m. one stormy Thursday morning. The police raided the apartment where she was staying. She tried to run, jumped out the back window, and sprained her ankle. The two men were arrested with her. In the initial sweep, police found stolen electronics, burglary tools, fake license plates, and detailed maps of multiple homes, ours included. When Diane got the call, she collapsed onto the kitchen floor and sobbed like something sacred inside her had finally broken. We were called in to give official statements that same afternoon. Diane insisted on coming. She wore sunglasses to hide her swollen eyes, but the moment we walked into that station, I could feel her trembling beside me. While I spoke with the detectives, she sat in a separate room, waiting. When I came out, I saw her through the glass, sitting face to face with Maya. I wasn't supposed to see that. No one had told me she was allowed to visit. But there they were, mother and daughter on opposite sides of a cold steel table. Diane was crying. Maya? She was smiling. Cold. Detached. Like she'd already accepted this as her fate and didn't care. When Diane finally came out, she looked empty. She said we made her feel disposable, she whispered. She said hurting us made her feel powerful. That night, neither of us spoke much. We sat on the couch, holding hands, trying to make sense of the madness. I couldn't shake the image of Maya in that room. Calm, calculated, completely void of remorse. Whatever line she had once tiptoed near, she had now crossed and destroyed behind her. A week later, the DA filed formal charges. Conspiracy to commit burglary, harassment, making criminal threats, and endangering the lives of others. Maya didn't even flinch in court. When the judge read the list of charges, she stood there with her hands behind her back, like she was listening to someone read a grocery list. No apologies. No tears. Just silence. As we left the courthouse, Diane turned to me and said something I'll never forget. She's gone, isn't she? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth hung in the air between us, thick, bitter, and undeniable. I thought the worst was over once Maya was arrested. I figured we'd go back to living, to breathing normally again without looking over our shoulders. But I was wrong. The real aftermath wasn't just about what Maya had done. It was how the rest of the world reacted when they found out. News like this doesn't stay quiet in a suburban neighborhood, especially not when the girl you raised just got charged with organizing a break-in on your own home. People talk. They speculate. They whisper your name like it's radioactive. The knock came 2 days after her arraignment, and it wasn't the police this time. It was family. I opened the door to see Diane's sister, Carla, standing there with her arms crossed, and a look on her face that said she was more angry than worried. She didn't wait for an invitation, just pushed past me into the living room and started in. "How could you let it get this far?" she snapped. Diane was still upstairs, lying down. I stepped between Carla and the hallway. "This isn't the time," I said firmly. But she wouldn't stop. "You could have called me. You could have called someone before you let the police throw Maya into a cage." I stood my ground. "She hired people to hurt us, Carla. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't teenage rebellion. She made a plan. She watched our house. She sent threats. But Carla wasn't listening. Her eyes were glassy with indignation. "She's still family," she hissed. "And you don't call the cops on family." That line. That tired, toxic line. I'd heard it a dozen times since the arrest, sometimes directly, sometimes through not-so-subtle Facebook posts or cryptic group texts. What they really meant was, You don't call the cops when it makes us uncomfortable. You don't choose safety over secrets. But I did. And I'd do it again. Diane came down halfway through the argument. She looked pale, her hair unbrushed, moving like she hadn't slept in days. When she saw Carla standing in our living room, her mouth tensed. "Not now," she whispered. "Carla, not now." But Carla ignored her too. "You're just going to sit there while your husband throws your daughter away?" Diane's voice cracked, raw, painful, honest. She tried to burn our life down. It echoed through the room like glass shattering on tile. Carla blinked like she'd been slapped. And then she left, without a word, without a glance back. But the damage was already done. Word spread quickly after that. Neighbors started treating us differently. We weren't the nice couple on the corner anymore. We were the couple who got the police involved. The couple who turned on their own. People didn't say it outright, but they didn't have to. You can hear judgment in silence just as clearly as in gossip. The mailman stopped making small talk. The woman from 2 doors down, the one who used to bring over banana bread around the holidays, suddenly stopped waving. Diane deleted her social media account after someone commented, "Hope you're sleeping well, snitch." It wasn't just the neighborhood. Diane's own mother refused to speak to her. Told her on the phone that a real mother never gives up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drag them all into that courtroom, show them the photos, the threats, the video of our house being filmed like a target. But they didn't care about facts. They cared about appearance, tradition, and the illusion of unity. To them, loyalty was more important than truth. And that's exactly why Maya had been able to get this far without anyone noticing what she was becoming. Diane started to unravel slowly. She wasn't angry, not the way I was. She was hollow. She'd wake up in the middle of the night and sit on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. Once, I found her in the guest room, holding one of Maya's old hoodies. She didn't cry. She just clutched it like it might make sense of everything. She stopped cooking. She stopped reading. Even her plants started to die. I tried everything. Dinners out, long drives, music, movies, but none of it reached her. Because how do you console a mother who had to watch her daughter become a stranger? And me? I was angry. Not just at Maya, but at everyone who made us feel like we were the villains in our own home. I started keeping a record of everything. Messages, calls, even passive-aggressive notes left in our mailbox. One neighbor accused us of bringing police drama into the neighborhood. Another said they'd always known that girl had issues, but still looked at me like I should have fixed it. Like somehow, I had failed to mold Maya into something more acceptable. The worst moment came about a month after the arrest. Diane and I had gone out for groceries, a small attempt at normalcy. As we were walking out of the store, a woman I didn't recognize stepped in front of us. Middle-aged, sharp voice, tight smile. "You're Maya's stepdad, right?" I nodded cautiously. "She used to babysit my niece," the woman said. "She was so sweet. Can't believe you people locked her up like a dog." Before I could respond, she walked away. Just like that. A hit and run of judgment. Diane broke down crying in the parking lot. I held her there, while people walked past pretending not to notice. We came home that night and sat in the living room in silence for over an hour. The walls felt tighter, the air heavier. And then, for the first time since this all started, Diane spoke with fire in her voice. She wanted this, she said bitterly. Not prison, but control. She wanted to ruin us. And she almost did. I nodded slowly, letting her words settle. Because they were true. As much as it hurt, as much as it broke us apart, Diane had finally stopped making excuses. And in that moment, we weren't just victims anymore. We were survivors. From that night forward, something shifted. We stopped answering calls from people who made us feel small. We pulled back from anyone who questioned our decisions. We cut ties, even family, if it meant preserving our peace. We didn't owe anyone an explanation. We didn't need forgiveness for doing what was necessary. All we needed was space to breathe again. Space to start rebuilding what Maya had tried so hard to destroy. The courthouse felt nothing like justice. It was fluorescent lighting, worn carpet, and the sterile hum of bureaucracy. Nothing about it felt noble or righteous, not the way you see it in movies. It was slow, disorienting, and cold in a way that settled into your bones. The kind of cold that made you question whether you'd ever feel warmth again. Diane and I sat side by side on a bench outside the courtroom, fingers loosely laced, waiting for the clerk to call us in. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say. We weren't here for closure. We were here for survival. When Maya was escorted in, shackled at the wrists and ankles, I felt the wind get knocked out of me. There was no fear in her eyes. No regret. Just boredom. Like she'd been summoned to a dentist appointment and planned to get through it with as little energy as possible. She didn't look at us, not even a glance. Her hair was pulled back. Her posture was relaxed, and when the judge asked her to confirm her name, she responded with a flat, "Yeah." Not even a "yes, Your Honor." Just "yeah." That's when it hit me. She wasn't here to fight. She was here because she'd already lost something she didn't care about anymore. The prosecutor was calm and clinical, laying out the evidence piece by piece. The text messages, the video of our house, the maps recovered from the apartment, the photos of stolen items, the witness testimony from the pawn shop clerk. Each fact landed like a hammer, and still, Maya didn't flinch. Her public defender didn't argue the facts, only tried to paint a picture of a troubled young woman, neglected emotionally, influenced by older, dangerous men. She was looking for control in a world that left her powerless, the lawyer said. I wanted to stand up and scream. Powerless? Maya had been given every opportunity. We paid for her therapy, her school supplies, her phone, her food. We gave her room, space, and time. I spent years trying to connect with her, swallowing my pride again and again just to keep the peace. Diane had bent over backward to love her through tantrums and silence. But the truth no one in that courtroom wanted to say out loud was this. Maya didn't just want power. She wanted destruction. And when love didn't bend to her will, she turned to revenge. Then it was Diane's turn to speak. Victim impact statement. I wasn't allowed to speak, just her. I watched as she walked to the front of the courtroom, her hands trembling slightly as she unfolded the paper she'd written the night before. She didn't look at Maya. Not once. Her voice cracked as she read. There is no word strong enough to explain what it feels like to be afraid of your own child. To wake up every night wondering if she'll come back, not to hug you, but to harm you. I will never understand how we got here. But I know now, with heartbreaking clarity, that love alone cannot fix what someone doesn't want to heal. A hush fell over the room when she finished. Even the bailiff looked uncomfortable. Maya didn't react. Not a tear, not a sigh, not a twitch. When the judge asked if she wanted to say anything, she shrugged. They got what they wanted, she said. They can sleep easy now. And that was it. No apology. No recognition. Just that same passive detachment she'd worn like armor since the arrest. The judge gave her a long look before delivering the sentence. 5 years. No parole for the first 3. Time to be served in a state correctional facility. Diane burst into tears the moment we walked out. I held her as best I could, my arms wrapped tight around her like I was trying to stop her from collapsing into the concrete. People passed us, some averting their eyes, others looking too long. I didn't care. I felt like I'd aged 20 years in that courtroom. My knees hurt. My chest hurt. Everything hurt. Because no matter how right we were, no matter how necessary that trial had been, there was no victory here. There was only loss. When we got home, the house felt even more hollow than it had before. It was as if Maya's sentencing had drained the last bit of energy from the walls. I stood in the hallway for a long time, looking at the family photos we hadn't taken down. One of them showed the 3 of us at the beach, Maya barely smiling, sand stuck to her elbow. I remembered how hard Diane had worked to get her to come on that trip, how many fights they had leading up to it. And now, the photo felt like a lie, a memory of a family that had never truly existed. That night, Diane asked me something I hadn't expected. We were sitting on the back porch, sipping tea, watching the sun dip below the fence line. Do you think I failed her? She asked. Her voice was soft, almost scared. I looked at her. This woman who had given everything, endured everything, still carried hope even when it scorched her. And I said, no, she failed herself. It wasn't cruel. It was the truth. Diane had bent over backward to keep that girl afloat. But at some point, people choose who they become. Maya had chosen darkness. And she didn't just walk into it. She dragged us in with her. Weeks passed, then months. Life slowly resumed its pace, but nothing felt the same. We kept our heads down, avoided gatherings, declined invitations. Diane went back to work part-time. I threw myself into house projects I didn't care about. New shelves, repainting the den, replacing old floorboards. It gave me something to control. Something to fix, even if it wasn't the thing that needed fixing. We never spoke about visiting Maya. We never spoke about the appeals process. The subject floated around us like smoke, always there, never touched. But one day, in early spring, Diane got a letter. It was postmarked from the prison. She opened it without a word and read it alone in the kitchen. I watched from the doorway, unable to breathe, waiting for her to either scream or cry. She did neither. She folded the letter neatly and dropped it in the trash. I walked over, picked it up, and skimmed it. It wasn't an apology. It was a list of complaints about the food, the cell, the guards. And at the bottom, one line in Maya's jagged handwriting. Hope you're proud of yourselves. I tore it in half and didn't say a word. It's strange how peace doesn't feel like a celebration. Not after something like this. There was no big sigh of relief, no triumphant return to normalcy. It came slowly, creeping in around the edges of our daily routine like a fog lifting after a long, sleepless night. Diane and I stopped talking about the trial, the arrest, the letters. We didn't pretend it never happened. We just let it fade into the background, like an old wound that finally stopped throbbing. Peace didn't feel like joy. It felt like not having to look over our shoulders anymore. And that was enough for now. The cameras stayed up. The locks stayed changed. And even though the police patrol stopped a few months after the sentencing, we kept our guard up in ways I didn't even realize until later. Every time the doorbell rang, I tensed. Every time a car idled too long near our driveway, I peeked through the blinds. The fear didn't vanish, it just evolved. It became part of how we moved, how we lived, how we loved each other. There's no manual for how to rebuild after your own child wages war on you. You just take one day at a time and hope tomorrow isn't as heavy as yesterday. Diane started gardening again. At first, it was just watering the plants she'd nearly let die after the arrest. Then it became something more, soil under her nails, new pots in the backyard, a compost bin by the fence. It wasn't about the flowers. It was about control, about creation after months of destruction. I'd sit on the porch with my coffee and watch her in the mornings, quietly planting things that might not bloom for months. That kind of hope, the kind that digs and waits and trusts, was something I hadn't seen in her in a long time. It wasn't loud. It wasn't proud. But it was there. We stopped answering most calls from family. Carla tried reaching out again, sent a message asking if we'd be open to talking things through. But we didn't reply. Diane wasn't ready. I wasn't sure I ever would be. I didn't need validation from people who only showed up to judge the decisions they were never brave enough to make. We weren't looking for sympathy. We were looking for quiet. And for the first time in years, we were finally finding it. But healing is never a straight line. It was a late Sunday afternoon, maybe 7 months after the trial, when we got another letter. This time, it was addressed to both of us. The envelope was thick, like it held something more than words. Diane hesitated before opening it. I watched her hands shake slightly as she pulled out the pages. Her eyes scanned quickly at first, then slowed. She didn't say anything, just passed it to me without a word. It was Maya again. This time, the tone was different. Not warm, but less combative. She said she was thinking about things, that prison had given her a lot of time to reflect. She didn't say sorry, but she did say she missed her mom. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't accountability. But it wasn't venom either. It was complicated. Diane reread it that night. Twice. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer in the guest room. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that, she said softly. You don't have to do anything, I told her. Just feel whatever you feel. That's all we could do. There was no right answer. Just a fragile thread that hadn't completely snapped, though it might never be strong enough to hold weight again. Sometimes, I'd find myself remembering small things. Maya laughing during that beach trip. Her and Diane dancing in the kitchen one summer when they thought I wasn't watching. These moments weren't lies, but they weren't the full truth either. They were fragments. Glimpses of the girl Diane used to believe in. And maybe, somewhere deep beneath all that rage and betrayal, that girl still existed. But it wasn't my job to find her. Not anymore. My job was to protect our home. And I had done that, no matter what anyone else thought. We never visited. Not once. Diane thought about it. I knew she did. I saw it in her face sometimes. Usually on quiet afternoons when she'd be out trimming the hedges or rearranging her flower pots. There was a wistfulness there, a maternal ache that hadn't gone numb even after everything. But she never brought it up, never asked, and I didn't press, because some wounds don't need closure. They just need distance. Time doesn't fix everything, but it makes things less sharp, less loud. Eventually, the whispers around town stopped. New gossip replaced old scandal. The neighbor 2 doors down filed for divorce. Another family had a teenager get arrested for shoplifting. Life moved on. Our house no longer felt like the scene of a crime. It felt like a home again. Quiet, steady, ordinary. And I cherished every inch of that ordinary life. Every morning coffee. Every evening breeze. Every time Diane laughed, really laughed again. I felt like we'd earned something unspoken. Something fragile and sacred. Peace, yes, but a peace paid for in full. One night, as we sat watching the sky darken, Diane asked me, "Do you think she's changed?" I didn't lie. "I don't know," I said, "but I know we have." That was the truth. We weren't the same people we were before Maya imploded our lives. We were stronger. Not colder, but firmer. We had boundaries now. We knew what we'd tolerate, and more importantly, what we wouldn't. Family is love, yes. But love without safety is just chaos. And we were done living in chaos. Some might say we gave up on her. Others might say we should have done more. But only we know the full story. Only we know what it felt like to sit in that courtroom, to find our house on a hit list, to wake up every night wondering if the daughter we once raised was planning our downfall. You can't explain that kind of betrayal to people who've never tasted it. And you shouldn't have to. So no, we didn't forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But we let go of the pain she planted. We dug it out, inch by inch, like weeds in the garden. And now, when I look at Diane tending to her blooms, I see something Maya never managed to destroy. Hope. Not the naive kind. Not the foolish kind. But the kind that knows what it costs, and grows anyway. If you've ever had to choose between protecting your peace and preserving a toxic relationship, you know how heavy that decision can be. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about survival, boundaries, and rebuilding from the ashes. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved for your own safety? Let's talk about it. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because real stories like this deserve to be heard. See you soon in the next story.